All right, here we are, week 2 of Cliff Notes, and I have traded Matt for Doyle.
Upgrade.
Definitely an upgrade. Doyle, you spoke this last week, and then you also wrote these questions.
I did.
And so if you're just kind of joining us this week and you didn't hear last week, what we're doing is we're going through 3 to 4 questions and we're discussing them. They're questions that maybe you thought of or you would like to think through from the last week in service. And it's a good way for you to go and have conversations with your friends or family. It doesn't have to be super formal. It can be just really like getting together and reading over the questions, discussing them with no, outcome or agenda really. So Doyle.
It's interesting. Last week I was walking out to my car out in the parking lot, and I walked past a young adult at a car talking to some other people. He goes, "Man, these are good questions this week." They were already doing their discussion.
Oh yeah, because they're on the door on the way out. You can grab some of the questions. So, all right, so walk us through the questions that you created for this week.
All right, so we talked about the patriarchs this last week, about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, and try to give a little learning on each one, what I thought some of the takeaways were, in addition to understanding the historical part of the redemptive narrative, what the takeaway was from. So I try to just ask the questions I think that was being asked of them in their spiritual journeys. And so the first one has to do with Abraham. And so I'll just read it. Like Abraham, God calls us to follow through in obedience. Where is God calling you to a next step of obedience in your life right now?
Okay, so you obviously had a whole week to think through this. What was your area of obedience that you're called to?
Loving my son. It's man.
That's weird because that was mine too. Was
loving your son?
You loving me? No. I was really praying for that.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like I'm always on the edge of not like struggling with trying to be obedient in some area. It might be an attitude. It might be everything from pessimism to cynicism sometimes. Right now, it's just, I think we're in a great space, both personally and at the church. And yet I don't really know my long-term, specific roles. Things change and need to change, and I'm excited about that. And so right now it's just really trusting God from day to day and keeping a sweet spirit and a positive outlook.
Yeah.
And so just trying to be obedient that God's in control, and He is, and there's all evidence of it. And yet my mind wants to find some negative to think about. And so for me right now, it's just going, no, God's got this. Enjoy today. Enjoy the gift of today and what I get to do. And that's been it's a good thing.
Yeah, for me, I shared this in one of my sermons in the last few weeks. Was mine is obedience with my time. Am I being a good steward of all the moments and with my schedule and all that stuff? And so it's just trying to be obedient and not like, it's funny, the longer you're a Christian, it's not like, okay, I need to spend my time on good things versus bad things. It's like, no, I need to spend my time on me things versus God things, and differentiating which is which and all those kinds of things. So my word for the year is intentionality.
Oh, good.
Yeah, trying to be intentional with my time.
That's a good word. I like it. Yeah. All right. So, and by the way, are you making progress?
Yeah, I am. I'm making a lot of progress. Kind of changed up my schedule quite a bit this year. And it's not even necessarily like doing more. It's just doing the right things and then kind of getting rid of some of the things that might be a little bit of kind of a waste of time, but not just wise with my time.
Yeah, I've been. It's funny because have you ever met someone they're just happy and you're just naive?
I mean, not in our family, but yes, I've heard of them
in the world.
Yeah, I've met them before.
Not everybody's.
I figure they're lying though.
No, that's what it's interesting to me. I think they're either in denial or they're silly.
That's how cynical we are.
And
like no one's that happy, please.
Exactly. And I realize that I've been watching some people lately who are been through really tough things in their life, and I'm coming to realize that they are choosing joy. It's not that they don't see the bad, and it's not that they don't realize what's happening in the world. They just are not going to. I was talking to your father-in-law yesterday, and he's a little ahead of me on his journey. He's a few years older than I am, not a lot. And he said, I just don't have that much time left on this earth to be bogged down by all the the worrisome things in the world that I can affect.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a great attitude. It was like I'm going to affect what I'm going to affect, and I'm going to enjoy the days that God give me. And it's not like he's, I'm not going to be here very long, but in terms of whole life, we're getting older, and I just liked his attitude. I was like, that's a really good thing. It's not naivete. It may be just ignoring things that aren't important. So
I did a funeral yesterday, and I said, I talked about how people deal with death. And I said, very few people are able to deal with death. I think this applies to pretty much all of life and still have a purpose and hope at the end of it. And I think maybe that's one of the things that you're kind of talking about there.
Yeah.
So, all right, we got other questions. Keep going.
Okay. Isaac. Like Isaac, all of us get a spiritual heritage. Describe yours and describe the one you want to leave behind.
Well, you can tell it, and then I'll add on because mine is sort of...
Yeah, so my spiritual heritage comes from both sides of my family. My mom's dad was a church builder, a carpenter who built churches. So it's kind of like, okay, strong Christian man, wonderful man of faith, not guy who'd ever speak publicly, really, or anything like that. But and then on my dad's side, my grandfather was a bootlegger. He was a criminal, gun fights and stuff, and he became a Christian, and eventually became a pastor. And so I had this wonderful legacy of authentic faith. You know what I'm saying? Not perfection, authentic faith. And yet I just had to go find out for myself a little bit. But I think it kept me from going very far because when it started kind of turning south on me, and I began to realize it pretty quick, I think I knew where to go and how to come back. And so I'm so thankful for that legacy. And I want to send that into the future. I want future generations to, in our family, to have that kind of knowledge of God, relationship with Christ, foundation for living.
Yeah. So I have obviously that plus my grandparents on both sides, and then my parents, and then Amy and her parents are pastors as well, and her mom's a worship leader, and so we have on both sides we have generations of not only Christians but people who are in ministry, and I've seen both where people come from that kind of family and it doesn't go well because they're not living it really behind the scenes, or there's a lot of dysfunction back there. I'm really grateful that I did not experience that. In fact, as I look at all the things that I have in my life, there's this, this old saying that you're standing on the shoulders of giants, which I do feel like that both spiritually and relationally is. We have this long line of people who have been living faithfully, and I get to live out all the benefits of that, and as I get older, it's funny because I look at all the different, because when you're growing up, you don't realize that your family is different than other families. And as you get older, you realize that good and bad is, oh man, here are the things that I never recognized, both the dysfunction and the health in the family. And man, I get more and more grateful for the heritage or the inheritance that I've gotten in my life and in Amy's as well. And so one of my biggest goals in life is just simply to pass that on to my kids, is to make sure I'm not the one that stops that from continuing on in the future.
Yeah. It's not hard to recognize the value of that when you go back a little bit on your family tree and look at some of the branches that kind of went a different direction and how that ended up. So that's a great source of gratitude for me. Yeah.
Yeah. But what about and maybe you're going to get to this, but you mentioned it in your sermon, is people who do not have that kind of heritage.
So I think the greatest, and my grandfather did this on my dad's side. I think the greatest joy for me, one of the greatest joys in pastoring all these years, is to watch people break the cycles of dysfunction and addiction and abuse in their families. I think that's one of the greatest miracles. So somebody says, how do you believe in God? I have seen so many lives changed, that changed families, changed marriages, changed whatever. So for me, that's a great source of encouragement and inspiration because I've seen it. I mean, I've seen it.
Yeah.
It works. It happens. And I see people raising great kids who their parents were absent or dysfunctional on some level that it's hard to imagine.
So maybe you could, and this isn't one of the questions, but just kind of popping into my mind is I know there's a lot of people in our church who do not have that, right? Who don't have that, and they want to break that cycle or that chain. What would you say they're going to have to do? Like maybe a few tips of hey, here's what it's going to take.
Realize your kids are going to become more who you are than what you say.
Okay.
So you better be growing. You better be sincere. Don't try to fake it in terms of your faith. Live it out. You'll do more damage than help if you say one thing and do a different thing. That's one thing. Be at church every week with your kids.
Yeah.
Be there. You go, well, what good does that do? Just show up.
So like I would say what you're saying is make it the top priority of your life.
Absolutely.
Make it the number one. Your faith and all the disciplines that go with it are the number one thing.
I've seen lots of people make lots of money and hand it off to their kids, but their kids were a mess. So
Yeah.
the money didn't do any good.
Yeah.
I've never seen somebody hand off a great spiritual legacy that regretted it. And then I think the third one is pray for your kids every day, and in front of them, by the way, and then get a mentor couple. If you come from a family that wasn't very healthy, had some challenges, there are no perfect families, there are no perfect marriages, but find an older couple who've been through what you're going through and seem to have a strong marriage, and interview them.
Yeah.
Find out if they really do have a strong, and if they do, start spending time with them.
Yeah. What I'd add to that is come in with a lot of humility, because we all have to have humility, but I've seen it with people who are coming from maybe a fairly unhealthy family of origins or whatever is, just assume that all your intuitions are wrong.
See, that's a really hard thing for people to do.
Totally. Very difficult. But just assume all your intuitions are wrong about everything. Because I've seen people come from those types of backgrounds, and they continue to rely on their own intuitions, both in relationships and in growing spiritually and things like that. And it's like, hey, they're probably wrong. So just assume that you're wrong and find some people that you really trust and allow them to tell you where to go and what to do.
That is huge. If you can figure that out, that is true. It's true for all of us. All of us have wrong intuitions in some area, right?
Yes.
But if you came from a family that really struggled and wasn't healthy, it's really hard.
It's so hard. And one of the things I've talked about throughout the years is sometimes I struggle with OCD. And so sometimes I have these intuitions about this is the seriousness of a situation or this is what's going on. And I have to realize my intuitions are probably wrong right now. And so I have to turn to people I trust, you or Amy or someone, and go, am I reading this correctly? Is this like a real problem, or am I creating a problem or whatever? And usually those people will speak into me and go, nah, you're overreacting. It's too much. It's not that serious. And so I have to trust the people around me more than I trust my own intuitions and feelings, and go, okay, well then I'm gonna trust that you know better than I do in this moment. And that is so difficult. But I think it's directly applicable to, man, relationally, here's how I feel about this situation, but I come from a pretty messed up background, so am I seeing this correctly?
Well, there's some things we assume. I love the story about your grandfather, not my dad, Connie's dad, a great Christian, and worked with us for many years, turning down a higher paying job because it spiritually would not benefit his children because they'd have to move.
Right.
His kids were planted in a church, lifelong family friends who were Christians, going in the right direction, turned down a better paying job in another city because it would not spiritually benefit his family.
Right.
And that was and it wasn't a big decision for him. It was just, oh no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And having been raised with someone who modeled that for you, and for me as well, is different.
Totally.
Because a higher paying job is always the right answer.
Yeah.
In some families.
A lot of families, yeah. Good. All right. Question number 3.
Like Jacob, sometimes we wrestle with God. What are you most likely to wrestle with God about?
Yeah, so this one's easy for me. One of the examples is doubts. I mean, that has been my story. It becomes less and less my story, or my struggle, I guess, as I grow in my faith and I walk in this faith. But that has always been a big part of my faith background, is asking a lot of questions. Excuse me. We did this test recently, the personalities test. And it's funny because, what's it called? Widget? Widget. And Patrick Lencioni. And it's an acronym. The first one is W, and it's wonder. And you ask a lot of questions, and you're always curious. And that was my top personality trait. So, man, that has applied directly to my faith, as I ask a lot of questions.
Yeah. That's my big struggle. They're all equal. I have millions of them, but biggest struggle, that's just being consistent, just God calling me to consistency, and God's not mad at me if I don't show up for prayer time on a given day, but my life doesn't go as well.
Yeah.
And, and I go through the day and I've got a bad attitude. So I realize, you know what? I have not spent enough time in the Word and enough time in prayer today. And so I think that's just a day-to-day, just being with God, I think. That'd be a big one. All right, last one. Joseph had to put God's agenda ahead of his own, and this led him to forgive those who had offended him. What do you need to forgive for kingdom's sake?
I want to let you go first. You wrote this one, so maybe you have something in mind.
Yeah, and this may be too personal to share with too many people.
Right.
So there's an interesting phenomenon when I think about this question.
I have one.
Oh,
well, I was thinking because there is a personal, like you can drill down personally into this, but one of the things that might be more global is people who have a different worldview on some really important issues. Because there are people who you go, I really detest this view, and anyone who holds it, I couldn't be around.
Right.
I couldn't.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that I struggle with is seeing people outside of just their views and their opinions, especially if I don't know them very well. You kind of just label them as this is what they think, this is what they believe, this is how they live, and so I want nothing to do with them. And I kind of have to learn to go, you know what? But you're just as messed up as they are in different ways, and so you've got to learn to forgive them as you receive forgiveness yourself for those things.
It's good. I was going to talk about, over the years, I realized that I keep a day off. I mean, I try to never miss a day off. And a part of what I do on my day off, usually some time out in my shop, just me. I need that alone time. I'm an introvert, so I need that time. Invariably, if I spend very much time out in the shop building something, whatever it is, and I'm just alone with my thoughts, past hurts will come up. Totally. Whether it's long-term or it's recent, where I felt betrayed or I felt mistreated or offended somehow. And oftentimes I find that they bubble up and I realize that I just buried them. I didn't really forgive that person. I just decided it was more effective to just keep going and just go, forget you, and I'm going to keep moving. And I never really came to forgive. The funny thing about forgiveness for me is it's not a one-time thing. It's a decision, but then I have to reaffirm that decision again and again because my old thoughts and bitterness or woundedness or self-pity, whatever it is, wants to bubble up and foment that thing into something that becomes central to my day. And in reality, I've already decided to forgive them, so I need to reaffirm that forgiveness. So a lot of times when I'm alone, those instances will come up, and I realize I haven't processed that yet. I haven't really talked to God about it and really gotten that forgiveness all the way down in there where it needs to scrub out the stuff. So for me, forgiveness is a huge deal. The other side of it is it's not the same as just walking away. Forgiveness doesn't just mean, okay, I'm not going to carry stuff around about you. It means I need to either reconcile with you or make amends or if there's a relational thing I need to do with someone, just saying I forgive you is not it, because that may be running away. You know what I'm saying? And so sometimes in forgiveness, I got to go, I need to talk to you.
Yeah. It's good. So you've been able to probably sit with this for about a week now of some of the content that you talked about. What has changed as a result of what you learned in this last week?
I tell you, here's my takeaway. It's none of these questions.
Okay.
It's actually, God likes me better than I realize. So even though I believe in faith-based relationship, I believe in a grace-filled relationship, there's still a part of me at times when I fall. I have a bad attitude. I say a mean word, or I'm not consistent enough in my prayer time or whatever, that I would never admit this and own this, but I feel like God doesn't like me quite as much sometimes. Do you know what I'm saying? It's my own guilty conscience. I know it has nothing to do with God.
Right.
And yet reading about these guys, I've never killed my brother.
Right.
I came close on a couple of occasions. I've never killed my brother. I've never told anybody that my wife was my sister in order to save my own skin. You know, I've never cheated my brother out of anything. I actually am not as bad as a couple of these guys, at least one of them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And yet God founded a whole redemptive plan on these messed up guys.
Well,
And so for me, the takeaway is I actually feel better about trusting God with my life, because if these guys who, and I don't know that I feel superior, maybe to Jacob, but it's I think God's grace is so much bigger than I allow for sometimes.
yeah, that's good. That's really good. Well, hey guys, it's as easy as that. Let's just sit down. We'll have some conversations with some friends or some family, see where it goes. These are some questions that maybe will prompt you and them in order to have some conversations. And we will see you this week for week 3.